Okay, so welcome to this live stream moment where we're looking at how to help your child like homeschool. I'm Dr. Fred Ray Lybrand. My wife Jody and I schooled our kids from age of birth to college and seen them do incredibly well. Very proud, happy for them. And we're trying to share, along with a lot of different information, kind of the things that we learned over time. Part of my background is a doctorate in applied theology, a master's in Bible, undergraduate degree in communication and fiction writing, and actually English literature was my major. And then I taught speech, University of Alabama, and taught in high school, and helped found a private school as well as this homeschooling. So I've got this mixture of all this stuff I've studied and learned. You could throw a year of law school in there, but I left because I found out the second year they remove your heart, so I didn't want to do that. We're looking at this topic of how to help your child like homeschool. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you have questions about that, please type them in. Since this is live, those of you who have been invited to be a part of this are going to be able to ask questions. So don't be afraid to do that, and I'll try to get to them. But I'm going to tell you up front, there's no possible way I can tell you everything that I know about this subject, because this subject has been one of the big ones that comes up again and again and again and again. And it's a common situation. I mean, let's just think of the problem. What is the problem? You know, I would describe it this way, the way moms and dads have described it all over the nation to me. The child is staring off into space. The child doesn't get work done, just sits there for hours and just won't do any of the work. Some of the kids cry and complain, somewhat have tantrums. They can distract the other kids. They can distract the whole home school. What's left in these kids? When they do it, they hardly do anything. You know, they write a half a sentence or do a problem or two in math, or don't really read or anything. And all of that can be incredibly frustrating to you because, you know, you're looking at a child who you've got to school and who, for whatever reason, really, really hates it. Now, I've got to do a true confession here. I was kind of one of those kids. I cannot say I really enjoyed school until late high school. College parts did better as I went further up, largely with me because it was about wanting to study abstract things, the way my brain's wired. I'm much more of an imagination work person than a real work person, you know, or reality work person. So I might design some shelves, but boy, I'm going to need your friendship to help me build them, that kind of thing. But as I've looked at this issue for you to think about how to help your child like homeschool, and it may be in degrees, like it more, like it even better. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a grandchild. But what I want to do is kind of walk through what's probably, I would call it 4 distinctions. And you start thinking about these 4 distinctions, and it starts allowing a solution to come up for you. But I can tell you, for starters, if you look at a human being and look at their behavior, so their actions hint at something. You can't always know why somebody's exactly doing something. Just like a dog that bites could be aggressive or it could be afraid. It's not necessarily just one or the other. But with human beings, when you see them that resistant, you can tell one thing for sure, and that is whatever they're doing or whatever they're anticipating in the future does not feel good. It feels really bad to them. And so they're willing to do whatever they're doing and endure that pain as a means of feeling better than what they think is going to happen. So some of this is unique to the child. It's not genetic necessarily. It's not exactly personality. but it does have to do with the way the game's structured and what's going on inside of them. So we're going to try to grab that. So let me go through these 4 distinctions and see if you find these helpful. And again, I would stress, I'm sorry, I'm checking making sure the chats are going out there. So I'd stress, please write your questions as I'm talking. But let's look at these 4 distinctions. The first distinction is to understand the difference between want and don't want, okay? So this is important and really dangerous, because if you frame the problem wrong, it's going to take you in a bad direction. So if you're sitting there saying, I want my child to not hate school, okay? I want them to quit fighting it. I want them to stop distracting. While all those things are accurate, they don't take you in the direction you want to go, because those are kind of like not goals. There's something you want to remove, to get rid of. It's a kind of problem solving, but generally, when we get busy trying to remove things, they stick around. There's a reason for that. The cycle is about, we're doing strategies to lessen our pain. The strategy works, our pain goes down, so we quit doing the actions. And so it kind of keeps this cycle going. I call it a problem soothing, not really problem solving. So that's the challenge. You want to focus on what you do want rather than what you don't want. And so in this distinction, what do you want? I would say you want your child to like homeschool. Didn't say love, love, but I did say like, I want my child to not hate. You could get there. They could be totally neutral about it, but don't you want a little more than that? You may not can imagine it. We're just in the imagination stage here, but imagine that they actually liked homeschool. And I'm going to argue that capacity is there, because most human beings, in fact, all of them, have been wired to like learning. Now, you'll notice it may vary with the subjects, but that's its own story. But generally, human beings like to learn unless something's significantly wrong. Let's go to the second distinction. The second distinction is something I noticed years ago when studying human personality and learning really, in a way, about abnormal psychology versus well, what they call, these guys and gals have branded this now as kind of what they call positive psychology. In other words, what's happened through the years of psychology, you think of a bell curve, and in that bell curve, we've got abnormal psych. So right down the middle, and you might have several of these, of what makes a person normal. So the middle would be considered normal, and the extremes are abnormal. So the problem with that is we're studying dysfunction, and then we're multiplying it so that literally no one who's normal in every category even exists. So the thing we're studying doesn't exist, and the way we're approaching it is it's all the abnormal people. We're trying to learn from the abnormal people what to do if you're normal. And so as a result, you're going to get some really squirrely ideas of what it's going to take, honestly, to help a child or anybody get to normal. That's not how you do it. Instead, when you start thinking about it properly, you want to start thinking about normal children or happy children or a child that likes homeschool, and start wrestling with what's going on in them, and then use that model or those insights to encourage what you're really hoping to see in your, not so liking homeschool child. So second distinction. The first is want versus don't want. The second is abnormal psychology versus positive psychology, or studying normal people. Third is that questions are the way out. This is a real big distinction. And I want to invite you to keep wrestling with this, because the kinds of questions you ask dictate all kinds of things in life. If you ask a question like, why are you so grumpy? Well, you'll come up with a catalog of reasons why someone is grumpy. Why does so-and-so hate me or dislike me? Why don't I have friends? That's a good one. Why don't people like me. Okay. So you catalog people don't like you. You have halitosis. You aren't nice to them. You're hyper picky. When you're around them, you dump all the words you can think of as fast as you can in 30 minutes, that kind of stuff. Rather than, how can I grow friends? How can I develop friends? I had no close friends until I was in my 20s, literally. And the two that I started with them are still close friends. So I grew up in politics. And so in politics, you can't have real friends because they'll vote against you. So you have acquaintances. And I got to where I wanted to have friends. So I started asking a different question about, what is friendship? How can I develop friends? How can I get closer to individuals? And so a lot of fun things came out of that. So learning to frame the questions properly is going to be crucial. And I'm going to come back to that. I have some questions for us, but I want to get to the fourth distinction. So questions are the way out. Abnormal psychology is not. And want versus don't want. Remember that distinction. So the last distinction that I want to mention is the relationship between anxiety, boredom, and what's called flow. So there's a famous book by, I meant to practice his name, Simoth Ekelehai. It's about 14 letters in his name. Researcher. And he's written several books. Creativity and Flow are his two most popular. But the flow one basically describes this thing that I've mentioned before. If you would, think of a chart, right? Get it right. So you can think of a chart, and in that chart, how it does, you've got in the middle is you've got a x and a y axis. And what happens is, in this particular way of thinking, you want to think about competence and you want to think about challenge. And basically, when there's really high competence but low challenge, like if someone's really good at a subject but you're not challenging them, they're going to be bored. If someone has a really a low competence but very high challenge beyond them, that's where anxiety is. And right in the middle of that graph, where it's challenging enough, right, and competence enough that it's stretching them just a little, that's where people get engaged. That's where flow happens. And you and your homeschool are going to want to generate flow for your child. It doesn't need to be too challenging, and it doesn't need to be too unchallenging or too boring for your child. So let's think about what to do. And I'll go back to these questions. So the questions I would come up with are not, why does he not like homeschool? So if you ask that on occasion, if you look at a homeschooler that's not liking it and you keep asking, why does he not like it? It's not going to work well for you. In fact, what comes from that? Why does he not like it? Well, he doesn't like the curriculum, so he changed the curriculum. Well, he doesn't like the lighting, so he changed that. Doesn't like where he sits, he changed that. Well, he needs to play his video games first so he can tolerate school. And you'll come up with thing after thing after thing, and you'll experiment, and guess what? They won't work because they're not getting you to a solution. Here's how you get to a solution. Ask a better question like, why do other kids like homeschool? So that'd be great. If you have friends or one of your others and you ask them, find out from these kids, why do you like homeschool? What do you like about it? You're going to find out they like the reading. They like something they learn. They like solving the puzzles. They like, our kids will tell you, and we'll come back to this. Here's what our kids liked. They liked being able to get school done so they could play and do other things in the afternoon. I don't know that they ever entirely liked school, but they learned to learn, and there are things they liked about it. But our kids more did school, but we'll come back to that. So why do other kids like homeschool? Find out. That could give you insight. Number two, how can I help my child like homeschool? Grab that question. How can I help my child like homeschool? That's worth writing down and walking around with for a week and pondering, like on a 3x5, and then on the backside, put ideas you have. How can I help my child like homeschool? How would that come about? So when you ask those questions, they lead you to better answers. So let's think about the application. Let's think, what do we do with these four distinctions and kind of pondering this stuff through? And the first thing I would say is that you want to build flow. I kind of hinted at that earlier. But you want to build flow. And what does that mean? Well, it means that for your child, he or she has a certain level of competence in any subject, and they have a certain amount of challenge, okay? And so if the challenge exceeds their confidence, they're going to be anxious. And that bad feeling about what the future is going to be when they can't do it and they'll feel stupid or upset you or whatever they've got in their head, that's going to be an issue, right? If it's too boring, if you're not challenging them enough, then they can just kind of dull out, fall asleep or something like that. So you're playing with a game specifically of how do I create challenges properly for this child? And in particular, what's going to happen is you're going to build confidence. That's actually the key. You're building confidence in them so that they have this experience. That experience, they're successful. That becomes the basis on which they take on another experience. That one becomes successful, and they become more and more confident about the whole thing. The way you do that is really two steps, but it comes under one idea. And the idea is you want to generate smaller successes for your student. You want them to succeed at what they're doing. The ones that don't like school, especially that are stressed, do not feel like they can succeed. They don't feel like they can do it. They hate it. They've complained. You've yielded to it, some reward in the structure. Don't worry about that. But what's going on in their head has something to do with the future's worse if they try and fail, right? Now, others that are just out and out bored, if a child just sits there and stares in space for an hour and in the last 5 minutes does all their problems, that's another question. What you're wanting to think about, though, is building small successes, build their confidence, okay? So let's take some normal subjects. Well, an illustration first. So swimming. I taught all our kids to swim, or I got them in motion, and we had them lessons, because I used to teach swimming to toddlers and to kids and life-saving stuff. It's one of the things I learned. And in teaching a child to swim, a little one, what you have to first do, the personalities can vary, but most children just throwing them in the deep end and hope they figure it out is usually not a good strategy. What you do with a little child, little toddlers, you get them in the water, get them wet, just in the shallows, get them out because they're kind of scared of it. But you've got them. They can have the wings on or whatever else. But what is actually going on? Camera just went out of focus. What's actually going on with a child is you're building confidence in them. So getting them to blow bubbles is a big thing because they can get their face wet and they survive. So once they find they blow bubbles and they're okay, they're fine. Once they find they can get out in the water and then get in the water and get out and they're fine. And the water feels fine. And then splashing is a little fun. It's like incrementally, step by step, little success, little success, little success. That's the game. So if you think about that with something like reading, how do you get a child to feel good, successful about reading? Well, the answer is they need to learn to read. So let's assume they know how to read. If they don't, you need to back up and do a good phonics program and help them understand how to decode this stuff and get them to read out loud with you so they can get confidence that what they're reading is actually a thing that makes sense. It's the thing that's working. That's the way you do it. Now, once they can read, then you might need to start putting in age-appropriate material, if that's a challenge for the child, or things they would find interesting. Mix in books that your child will find of interest. So the reading itself can be exciting, incrementally. So it might be a small book. It might not be, you might not start out in the curriculum where you want to. You might need to back up. So what? We're trying to build. Let me tell you, if your child learns to like school, you're going to catch up really fast. You'd be surprised. When people like things, they're willing to practice them. Let's pick another area like math. And what I haven't stressed is figure out your child's reading level so you can build from there. The same with math. If you will find out where your child is, if they are doing math that's far beyond them, then they're not going to have confidence. They're not going to be in flow. They're going to be anxious. If it's boring, I think they just need more of a challenge, more problems in less time or something like that. Some way in which to really make this work as far as an incremental, smaller successes process. So commonly kids don't like learning their math facts. And we had a strategy of you got to learn your math facts before you can learn math. That was the way we rolled. And so as a result, our kids did it. And we had a system, made them practice whatever. We didn't make them learn all their math facts at once. We broke it down into pieces. You can too. So, if a child wants to do some math and they don't know their facts, who cares? Let them do some math or do some other kind of math, some counting thing. Or something else you figure out, maybe some math games or whatever. That doesn't matter. I do think getting them to learn their math facts is crucial because it makes them have more confidence. But my goodness, if they learn 2 or 3 math facts a day, so what? So they really learn it and they review those and add a couple of more. If you're overwhelming them and it's just too much, it could be boring or anxiety. So break it down into something more incremental that they can get a smaller success. How about something like writing? So does your child hate writing, like to write, scared of writing? I'm going to tell you the secret to writing is going to be the word. So the word, you got to be able to write a word. So can your child write a series of words, even just a list of, look out a window and notice what they observe? Maybe they write tree and car and sidewalk and bird and whatever. So what? Next day they do it again, but bird is robin. You invite them to get more specific about what they observe. Really, writing is about the sentence. So it's when you put some words together. That's incremental. Demanding a child write a 3-page paper can overwhelm them. Asking them to write separate sentences, not so bad, especially if you give the item or something like that. So in our writing course, that's what we do. We're trying to help them grow their success. And we really try to stress that they're not what they write. So that what they write, we just want to write something okay. And that's a lot of the challenge with a child. If a child thinks they've got to do perfect, that anxiety stuff, because perfection is beyond anybody's skill level, they can't do it. You might have other things in there like art. It could be the same thing. You really don't start them out trying to paint a perfect scene. We start with stick figures or little abstractions or the best they can. And that's what kids do. They draw and you say, hey, that's good. Why don't you put legs on that giraffe? Oh, good idea. And so they add that. It's that incremental growth, that confidence of playing with it. That's kind of the philosophy behind engaging a child. When a child doesn't like school, there's a confidence, anxiety, boredom game going on because they don't feel like they can win at this game. I'm going to tell you that's really underneath it all. Last couple of things I'd like to stress is, one, you really want to limit school time because when people think something's going to last forever, that's like being in prison or something like that with a life sentence. So if they don't know that there's a boundary on the time, and I'd say a boundary per subject, but certainly a boundary for the day, that means it's limited. So if they put in the effort on what they're limited to focus on, then they're going to know it'll end. It won't last forever. And when people know something won't last forever, they're much more patient, much more willing to endure it. The other thing I'd like to stress is you want to make sure after school is fun. So school is not going to be always fun. I'm just going to tell you the truth. Our kids, we really wanted them to learn how to look at math and say, I don't feel like doing it. oh well, so what, and get it done so they could go have fun, as I mentioned earlier. Go things that are more exciting. That's the way things go. If there's a bit of a payoff, then life's going to be better. If they've got to do school all day and just sit there and look at it until it's all done, or it's sporadic and they have no control, maybe we're going to do school early or late. Maybe they're going to negotiate you. Oh, let's not do it today. You go through all that. Not a good strategy for them learning to like school. They're much better off knowing we're going to do school during this period of time. For us, it was 7:30 to 12:30. So it was that 5-hour period. It had some exercise in there, a break of some type, but mixing up subjects and a process. And they had each segment. They knew what they needed to do. If they didn't get it done, they had to do homework in the afternoon. But for the most part, the kids knew if they would get focused and get their work done, they had their afternoon free and no homework. It was a great payoff. And especially on days when you have something fun to go do, it's when we get school done, we'll go do this fun thing. Maybe it's lunch, maybe whatever else. But that gets them engaged in being, really the sense is that they can control their destiny. They can actually control what's going on with school in their life. And when they have a sense of control, a sense of payoff later, a sense of growing confidence that I can learn this thing and this next thing because you're not asking me to do too much, but not too little either. You got to find that for the kid. You'll find that it tends to engage them. Now, mostly I've been talking about young children, so teens are a little different. But not in principle. It's just you got to figure out how to apply it. I certainly could tell you if they're gamers, they shouldn't be gaming until after school's done. And if that was a thing that you didn't mind them doing, I'd say there's some game in play that you could have that they do. The sooner they do school, they're more accurate or whatever, the sooner, the more time they can get. Maybe it's just limited to weekends and they can do extra reading, get minutes. I don't know. You can figure out that system. But we'll address that in the future. But in the meantime, this is how I want to invite you to think, especially on the question of, how can I help my child like homeschool? If you'll hold that question and keep thinking about it, in the next day or two or three, you'll probably come up with a much better answer than I've offered here because of the ingenuity of human beings when they can ask the right question. All right, that's my thoughts on how to help your child like homeschool. Any questions, shoot them to me right now. I know there's a little delay in the system, but I'd love to pop it up here and give it a shot. I, of course, like to know people are listening. I like to know the sound's good. I like to know where you're from. But if you have a question, shoot at me. I will say this. I have a warning on this software. It says, due to the COVID-19, we're experiencing high volumes. So sometimes these things don't get through. But I'll give it a second more. And otherwise, I want you to have a great day. And I'll be here again tomorrow with something fresh at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks. Bless you.